All right, welcome everybody. Sorry for the delay. The Tuesday, October 18th, 2022 Town of Monroe Planning Board regular meeting. Noreen, would you please do the roll call?
Bonnie Franson.
Here.
Jeff Manson.
Here.
Pat Shea.
Here.
Nick Napoli is out. Dylan Penn is out. Robert Garstack.
Here.
He's filling in for Nick Napoli, and Louis Rivera filling in for Dylan Penn this evening.
Thank you. So I'd like to point out, sorry?
Lewis's mic is muted and so is Pat's.
So just so you guys know.
Testing.
There you go. It's on.
Testing.
All right, so without the fire exits are the two that are behind you. There's the main entrance that you came into, and then there's one on this side, which takes you out to a patio on the side. With that, let's all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag. All right, with that, the first and only item on the agenda is Pilati Village. Is there any particular map, or should I bring the map up, or anything you want to start with, Mike?
Okay, I wanted to make sure my mic was on.
Okay.
You can start with the site plan itself if you want, that sheet.
Good, or is there a different? Want to start here?
That should be fine.
Okay.
Actually, I'll tell you what, the next two, though, are larger scale views, so they may be more beneficial.
Okay, so start with this one then?
That's fine. So in large part, the design itself has not really changed that much from the previous versions or iterations that this board has seen. What we essentially have completed since the last time we were here was the well testing has been completed, and we have submitted at least the pump test results. We didn't have enough time necessarily to put together the final report, and we did not get back our water quality test results yet, just not enough time. But we do have more than adequate water on both sides of the road, and the results of that well test proved that there was very little, if any, drawdown in any of the monitoring wells that we had selected. We also had visited the site with the planning board's consultant, Dave Tompkins. There was another Army Corps wetland, as you can see in the bottom left side of the page, that is along the fence line, essentially, that adjoins the Mansion Ridge Golf Course right there. Yep. We've shown the 100-foot Monroe Town buffer. And if you move forward to the next couple of sheets on the grading plan, you'll see that what we've done there is we've erected a retaining wall now around that wetland boundary line. We do have a small amount of disturbance that's associated with the outlet piping from the stormwater ponds. However, I don't remember the exact number off the top of my head, but we're well below 1/10 of an acre of disturbance on both sides of the road for Army Corps wetlands. And we will be submitting very shortly to the Army Corps of Engineers for a nationwide permit now that we have all this established and done. So again, the wetland boundary or buffer there has been updated. You can see there the areas that I've highlighted or hatched that show the actual disturbance areas, which are pretty much only associated with the culvert outlets. Again, the wells were drilled on both sides of the road, tested, adequate water seems to be available. There did not appear to be any impacts to any of the monitoring wells as a result of that testing. We did prepare a landscaping plan. We prepared a revised landscaping plan for your consultant's review. We also did get some additional comments back from the planning board consultants. There were some very, very minor technical items that are left on the stormwater pollution prevention plan and also on the site plan, none of which I don't believe are going to change essentially any of the design that you see before you. They're very minor comments. I mean, that's pretty much in a nutshell what we've kind of completed and covered since the last time we were here. We do feel that the plans right now are in a position for this board to consider some type of a neg deck or a public hearing. We did want to consider a joint public hearing with the town board because the town board also does need to weigh in on this, at least in terms of landing the CCR zone. I'm sure they will have their input, so it seemed beneficial to consider the joint public hearing between both boards. I think that pretty much summarizes what I have to say tonight for this board, and I'll defer to any other comments that the board and its consultants may have. I would also note that we did get a comment letter from Orange County Planning, which actually recommended approval of the proposed action.
All right, so with that, I'm going to ask first, Ashley, if you could give sort of an overview, since we have people present from the public, in terms of where we are in the process, like the planning board's role right now and rezoning, et cetera.
Thanks, George. So this project is before the board for, and the town board for conservation cluster zoning. So for this project, the town board consented to the planning board being lead agency for purposes of seeker. So this board, in addition to having your role, which is advisory to the town board on the master development plan that's required for the conservation cluster zoning for the town to then go ahead and change the zoning. This board's actually also doing the seeker review for both that rezoning and the applications for site plan approval, and I believe ultimately there'll be a subdivision involved. So there's really three main approvals. The first is the rezoning, which is by the town board, and then there's the site plan by the planning board, and then a later subdivision after the site plan is approved. So right now the board is been declared lead agency, and you've been proceeding in a coordinated seeker review, and you did review the EAF Part 2 at a prior meeting. You had not yet made a determination of significance or authorized the drafting of one. I do believe there were some items. I know the well testing had to be done. That was done. You're waiting for reports from your consultant. I believe you're also waiting on a report from Dave Tompkins, who is your ecological wetlands consultant as well. I think Sean could probably speak to other items that were maybe outstanding for purposes of seeker. I think there was a habitat report. Was that submitted?
So yes, we did submit a habitat report to both the town and the DEC. The DEC, I have forwarded that correspondence. The letter was dated April 21st, 2022. As it related to habitat, their main concerns were to have the proper tree clearing note placed on the plans as it relates to tree removal for Indiana and northern long-eared bat. Their other comment was that the site is adjacent to timber rattlesnake dens of some sort, so we had to put together a encounter and monitoring program for the timber rattlesnakes. Those were the only comments that we received as it related to the habitat, and the tree clearing note is on the plans. It has been for a while, and we did put together a timber rattlesnake encounter plan on the actual plans. We have not heard back from the DEC yet as it relates to the acceptance of those items. However, they were prepared in accordance with their guidance documents, so I would expect that they will respond favorably.
Those have been submitted.
Yeah, they have been submitted, yeah.
For a few of it I had noted for purpose. I will just talk for a minute because there was a discussion about the public hearing, so this board should first complete seeker, because if there was going to be in the event of a pause deck, you would have to coordinate all your hearings. So the first step would be to make a determination of significance. I think you're able to ultimately hold a joint public hearing with the town board, if the town board's inclined, on the site plan element and the rezoning element, but then the subdivision's going to come after that, and that'll then require its own public hearing, because you do have to have all of the properties combined as one for purposes of the conservation cluster zoning and site plan approval, and then if there's a later subdivision, that'll have to go through that process. I think where you are as far as tonight, talking about seeker, what else might be needed in order to finish the review of the Part 2 and authorize the drafting of a neg deck.
So at what point, unless we've done it already, and I don't recall, do we, just as we did with Rye Hill, we prepared a memo to go to the town board in terms of our recommendations or findings? When does that get done, or did we do
So
that?
that would be, you haven't done that yet because seeker hasn't been completed. So
Right.
first seeker has to be completed, and then
And
you
then we'll
would do
do-
that. So
okay.
I guess it would be, or it should be, in advance of any public hearing that the town board would have. There are those timeframes in the law, but this applicant, they haven't applied in this case, and I think that's been with the applicant's understanding because this board was doing the seeker. So typically, under the conservation cluster zoning, the town board would have already done the seeker for it, so you would only be giving those recommendations, and that's why there's the shorter time frame. But in this case, it was unique, so you
Okay.
should do that, though, before a public hearing, for sure.
I think what I would like to get done before we make our determination of significance is, I don't know when you were last before the town board. Was it recent, or has it been a while?
It's been a little while.
So I'm thinking that it'd be good just to get, not necessarily the full site plan, but the sheets that talk about what the units will be, just a program summary, and just make sure they don't have any comments on seeker that we should consider before we do our own determination. But just to get their input, because this has been in front of us for a while. I don't know to what extent the units or the layout, et cetera, when they last reviewed it, just to refresh their memory.
We could do that. Is it possible that we could consider a date, and in the meantime, I could make an appearance before the town board? We're losing another month that way if...
Well, I think for now, you could even email it to them. I don't necessarily know that they'll want to meet or have to meet, but I want them to be aware of where we are and if they have comments,
But I
so that
think
we don't forget something.
What actually might be helpful, too, is I think back in the beginning, you did submit a petition under the conservation cluster zoning, but things, I think, have probably changed since then in some respects. So maybe if you could look at that petition and update it to make sure it reflects your current proposal as far as the layout, design, number of units, and all of that, and submit that to this board as well, because when this board does its recommendations, they'll have to go through those criteria in the conservation cluster provisions.
I did give the town clerk one of the rolls of the plans.
Okay.
Current one that was just, town clerk does have it for the plan.
And then since you usually submit with like a Dropbox or with
I
a
didn't
file
send
share.
that up to her, but I can send it up to her in the
Yeah,
morning.
I was going to say, so we could easily send that up,
Yep.
and then they'll have everything.
You want to forward that Dropbox link? That's probably the easiest thing.
Yeah, I'll just forward
I
it up
think
to
so.
Valerie tomorrow and tell her to get it to the town board.
Right.
Their next meeting isn't till, I think, November 6th, and then their second one is November 21st, after our two November meetings.
Okay. Ashley, since you started, did you have any other comments on what was received?
I think those were the main items. I know we're waiting on things from your consultants.
Sean, do you have comments?
Sure. So as Mike stated, he submitted a revised stormwater pollution prevention plan. We've reviewed that and concur with Mike that there's no significant changes necessary for the plans to be able to conform to that SWIP, just very, I would say, relatively minor technical items to be addressed. Mike's office has copied Noreen and I on the submissions to New York State DEC for the wastewater improvements for both sewer treatment plants on both sides of the road. the wetlands adjacent area disturbances, so the 100-foot buffers around the DEC wetlands that are being disturbed, as well as as Mike stated, the threatened and endangered species mitigation efforts. And the well testing, as Mike stated, the water quantity report has been submitted to the planning board. I've gotten that to Frank Getchell for his review. I've spoken to him briefly about the testing, but we're awaiting his official report back to the planning board. One of the previous questions that I had for the applicant was with regards to the amount of cut and fill on the site and how that relates to truck trips that would be coming to and from the site. They've reported back in a letter from their traffic consultant that 61,000 cubic yards of fill are necessary on the south side, which equates to about 208 truck trips. And for the north side, 47,000 yards of fill are needed, which is 160 truck trips.
Why so much fill in general?
I think in general, it's because of the amount of, or the relatively close proximity of rock to the surface would be my guess.
It's twofold. That's got a small part that's associated with it. If you recall, this site's been developed a long time ago before stormwater facilities and the sort were required. So you have a pretty, on the northern site, you have a pretty sloping topography from right to left if you're on Harriman Heights Road, kind of looking at the site. So in order for us to construct these stormwater management facilities in association with today's standards, we had to pretty much kind of fill in around the low area on the site, if you follow what I'm saying, to create this stormwater management pond. We were looking to prepare a technology for the town that would incorporate a lot of runoff reduction volume, so infiltration was highly desired by, I believe, the town board, by the planning board and us. So what we did was we were able to use that existing ground, that basal area there. We tested that. Everything was in accordance. I believe Sean's office witnessed the soil testing for the northern site for sure, and saw some of the southern site as well while we were there. So in order to construct that infiltration basin at such a low point while the rest of the site's much higher in topography, it required us to kind of fill in around that low area. That's predominantly the major reason for the additional fill. There's not as much fill in the construction areas of the sites as there are in the stormwater facilities. In the back of the multifamily buildings for the northern lot, we also had to raise that parking lot up in the back because it slopes off pretty steep as it relates to that Army Corps wetland in the back. So those are our two major fill areas over there. If you've been to the site, actually we've been to the site together on the southern side, towards the back right-hand side, if you haven't noticed, the topography shoots up. And so in that lower area in the front, we kind of had to bring in some fill there to blend in that topography that's in the back because it goes up so much higher in elevation. So those are the real reasons for the fill that's on the site.
So the fill can't be achieved by cutting within the construction areas? It can't be balanced more?
No, we took a look at that. We do have some shallow depth of bedrock here, which is preventing how much we can cut. And we want to keep kind of what we have there to make sure we have proper depth of cover to foundations and things of that sort. We wouldn't be able to cut enough to get a proper balance, so the project was always pushed in this direction.
So then with regards to the water supplies, so the applicant's proposing two water system, public water supplies on the northern and southern side of the site, similar to the wastewater. Mike's office has copied the planning board on those submissions to DOH. That was last submitted August 24th. I don't think there's been any response to that.
No, there was not. That was just for a well location approval, essentially. As a matter of fact, on the southern site, the email was for me to get a reapproval to move the well slightly, because when we staked it in the field, it would have required cutting some trees. I remember your request of not cutting any trees, so we moved it about 10 feet or so. and I just resubmitted it to Health Department to make sure that they were aware and approved of that relocation.
Last comment I had was with regards to the truck turning diagram. So there, in the plan set, there is truck movements for the ladder truck for the fire department. I just requested that the circle that is proposed in front of the senior complex on the southern side, that a truck turning diagram be provided for that area, as well as more than likely someone would fight a fire from that location. So
Take no exception to that. We'll prepare that.
I'll start with comments that the planning board may have. I know we have some new members, so they may not even be up to speed on this, but if there's any questions or comments you want to raise, I'll start to my left. You want to start?
No, I don't. Are we going to be going further on the seeker process?
Well, I think we need to get a handle on, and I'll get into this, I think just the list of all the studies, dates, who submitted, because I think we need to put some kind of comprehensive, narrative together of the analysis, because there've been so many studies during this time period. It'd just be good to have the list, summary of each of them, where things are, almost like a matrix. So we make sure we incorporate everything into whatever our determination of significance is. So that's where we are. We haven't done a neg deck or a pause deck at this point. And I think once we have that summary, if there's anything else that's outstanding as we've gone through the process, we should address it. Again, going back to the town board, see if they have anything, and then we can wrap it up.
Other than that process, I have no other questions.
Thank you. Jeff?
My question actually is for Ashley in relation to process. If I followed correctly with what you were saying, you were suggesting once we've completed seeker, then the next step would be to complete our recommendation memorandum to the town board and then go to public hearing. And I guess I'm wondering why we wouldn't do public hearing in order to get input towards our recommendations. I'm wondering why you're suggesting doing it in the one order rather than the other. What's the...
So the way the process typically works is you would do your recommendations, then the town board holds its own public hearing, and the town board would hear from the public on that. So this applicant's asking you to have a joint public hearing, and as far as the planning board's site plan approval and the town board's master development plan rezoning. So that's why I suggested that you first have your recommendations to the town board, because then it's really up to the town board whether they want to move forward and schedule a public hearing, which is based in part on your recommendations.
So it's because we're thinking about doing it as a joint public hearing that would be the way to do it.
And you don't have to. You can, you could do it the other way.
Could we have the joint hearing but not close out seeker until after that hearing? Just in the event that there's someone from the public, they have some knowledge of something. I don't know if the cease, if that particular...
Under the conservation cluster process, which has been modified a little bit for these circumstances, it does require seeker before you make your recommendations, because that's then considered a complete application or a complete petition.
So the seeker has to be completed before?
That's how the,
Okay, I could do the same.
typically it's done, and that is part of the complete findings or the negative declaration.
Do we have all the elevations up to date at this point?
They've been submitted quite some time ago. We haven't heard any comment from this board in over a year on those.
Probably just make sure everybody revisits that before we close this out.
You're looking where you just put referral to the, yeah, that's it right there. So that explains what's included in the referral and then what triggers the planning board's authority to make recommendations.
Where is it that I'm missing, where it says the seeker process? Here.
In the middle, such referral shall include the proposed petition, the master development plan, and a negative declaration of significance or an EIS. The planning board then reviews that and makes
Oh, here, okay.
recommendations. So here, again, you're the lead agency, so you're going to be the one making that. Don't think that was me.
Might have been me, I don't.
You'll be the one actually making either the neg deck or, proceeding to an EIS, but that is something that the process contemplates is done before you make your recommendations.
Okay. So we could still, just to get public input, we could do a hearing, and then the hearing would end, close, and then we issue the neg deck, and then it goes to the town board. They then refer it to us. Is that an option?
Close a public,
I guess in theory, we could have our own can we have our own public hearing? Because are we doing the site plan, or is that really, in this instance, the authority of the town board? Because they're doing the zone petition, they do the master development plan. We review, and I thought, do we approve the site plan and the subdivision?
But first,
I know, it's the
complicated.
process that's.
so.
We can't approve the site plan
Until
until
the
the zone has
rezoning,
been landed.
exactly. So it's
Right.
really not
So
a.
that comes after that.
Exactly,
We're-
and it's really not a true site plan application before you until the rezoning is
Until you have the master
approved.
development
So I
plan.
think ultimately,
So it's really not a site plan application, it's really the master development plan
exactly,
that we're
and
looking
you're
at.
doing the seeker, which is considering the site plan as well as,
So the question is, do we need, or do we want, some sort of public hearing prior to making our determination on seeker?
Right, or, we don't even have to necessarily call it a public hearing per se. I know there's some communities, early on, they'll do like a public information meeting, so just that we have gone out and allowed the public to give us some input before we do the seeker determination. Just in some way to open it up. So I don't know if we could do something like that, and then we're not maybe injecting ourselves into the other process that's really in front of the town board.
actually, the more I think of it as well, this board doesn't require public hearings on site plans, so I know there was a request for the joint public hearing, but it would really just be a town board hearing on the law change, and then after, assuming the zoning's approved, and then they come back for a site plan, and then later on the 4-lot subdivision, that's what you would have the hearing on, the subdivision.
Right, so that's not going to happen until after everything's
Exactly.
already been approved.
So there'd really be no need for a
Right,
joint public hearing.
right.
But this board, if you wanted to have some type of public comment period or some,
And it's mostly for the,
Designated.
for the seeker process. Well, let's give that some thought, because we're talking about it, but I think you wanted to especially get into the process of.
Well, and I think that we can complete that while our remaining reports are outstanding. Right? We could do a public information session while we're waiting for these final reports to be submitted. Then we'll have
Yes.
all the information we need. We'll have asked all our questions. We'll then be sure that everything that we reviewed in the EAF Part 2 has been reviewed to our satisfaction, and then we make a determination.
Right.
That's what it seems. And then we make our recommendations to the board, and
Right.
then it moves to their part of the process.
At least there's some input, again, prior to determination.
Can I ask, what was the modification that we're looking for from the CCR? You say it was being modified?
So the applicant's proceeding under the conservation cluster zoning, where that allows for the development to be more central. You don't apply the normal bulk requirements. The town board has the ability to modify those. So where you're developing on less land, more densely, in order to preserve more open space, there's a requirement to preserve, is it 65% under that? So it's a different, it's basically seeking to change the zoning for this specific property.
It like allows more development, but also requires more open space, I believe.
I think what he was asking is, how did it change between the town board being more in control as opposed to the planning board now being seeker lead agency, if I'm not mistaken? I think that's what his question was.
That's what I took it as.
Yeah.
Well, so if it's in comparison to Rye Hill was actually evaluated at the time that they created the zoning district. It was like the test case. So that seeker process on that particular project was completed. And so now there's just a seeker evaluation to the extent that it's changed from what was evaluated under the original, and it was an environmental impact statement. Here, there was no seeker evaluation when they created the zoning district, so that's why it has to be done now. And the town board wanted the planning board to act as the lead agent.
Right. The CCR law would allow the town board, of course, to act as lead agency on seeker. In this situation, they decided to delegate that to the planning board, use us for our experience and expertise on that, as well as just getting our recommendation. So that's, I think, the modification that we're getting at.
Not so much delegated, but because the planning board is an involved agency, they consented to the planning board being the secret lead agency. And I just pulled up, it was in their referral resolution. So when they received the petition for CCR zoning and they referred that over to the planning board, they expressly consented to the planning board being the lead agency, so.
Thank you.
Have additional comments?
Thank you, I'm good.
Okay.
If I might ask the question,
Sure.
obviously we do have a significant amount of information that's been provided to this board.
Right.
The plans are in a very, very well-developed stage.
Yes.
They've been thoroughly reviewed by this board and its consultants. Would we at least be in a position tonight to have the board write the letter of recommendation at this point for this to be referred to the town board? Just so that we have some action that can be taken, and while we're doing things in the
Yeah.
background, we just
I don't-
we want to try to be
The
more efficient, not
process-
lose time.
We can't.
Is for the recommendations to
Process.
come after seekers complete.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
I
that's
think,
what we've been trying to figure out.
and I think the chair had mentioned before, getting some type of matrix, and perhaps you could put together an EAF Part 3 narrative where you refer to those studies and include them, because I know there's been multiple submission dates that you are more familiar with what was submitted in general, and rather than I'm trying to dig and piece together to get some type of Part 3 narrative from the applicant, and then that's something the board can work off of,
Right.
identify anything else you
right.
might need.
So so the list with, let's say, the last revision date of the studies, so that can be an attachment to our decision in terms of everything that was done. And then we would have a summary of, how it addresses the Part 2, so that we can then make our determination. So, and I'll work on that too. So in terms of my comments, there was additional wetlands on the site,
Correct.
not significant amount, but my question is, with the CCR, is there any, in determining density or intensity, does anything have to be subtracted out? I don't recall.
If you take a look at the site plan sheet, we can double check if I have any calculations for it. I don't recall. I know steep slopes were one of them, but I don't recall the other ones.
Okay. So
Wetlands definitely have to be subtracted. Question, I haven't looked at whether or not that affected the 35%.
yeah, I mean, may have, plenty of land compared to, but I don't remember.
Can you bring up
Sure.
the master development plan? Because it would be on the first sheet. Like, I have a table over there, and it would tell us what, if we were required to calculate net lot area. It might actually be in the petition also. So go back a few sheets. The sheet, keep going, I'll tell you when I see it. Next one. Next one. There it is. So if there's any calculations for like net lot area and things of that sort, it'd be probably on the bottom right hand, or in the right-hand side, middle of the page, right where your cursor is, right there. Yep.
I'll open space calculation, FAR calculation, the building sizes, lot area.
Is take a look at the conservation plan, which would be like sheet 2.
So the 5% that has to be preserved is of the total gross lot area.
Okay.
And it does prioritize certain areas, those that are constrained by sensitive resources, that type of thing. Then the permitted density is based on the gross lot area without reduction of constrained lands.
Okay, so there is no
That's correct,
calculation?
yes, right.
Okay, so it doesn't affect density?
correct.
Perfect, okay. The other thing is that so I know a lot of things are being submitted to Army Corps and to DEC, but since we're issuing a wetland permit, we need some summary of the wetland impacts that we have to make a decision on. So both direct wetland impacts and then how much area is being impacted in the buffer, and then some evaluation of that.
Evaluation under the town's wetlands.
Right. Seeker analysis we discussed the process, habitat report. So when we do the additional wetland, or if there's been a wetlands report, we just need to make sure everything's consistent and incorporates that little change. We talked about the density requirement. I think those are my comments at this point in time. So really, the studies are done, to some extent, or the analyses have been done. We're just waiting for some final studies. In other words, like I think you talked about the final water supply report.
Water quality data.
Yes, correct. We're waiting for water quality, correct.
Right, so that'll take care of that.
But I would also note that that's a Department of Health issue, not necessarily it's an outside permitting agency that would grant that. I can appreciate that the planning board wants to review that also.
And from a seeker perspective as well, that it's quantity, so it is some.
You know when the water quality testing will come back?
Should be soon. I can't say, I would imagine within the next week or two.
Okay,
But I would also note that I appreciate the attorney's comments, but based on whatever the quality is, it's our job to determine what the technologies are going to be to provide potable water to this particular project, and it's a doable thing. The bigger concern is the quantity. If we don't have water, we can't supply it. If we have water that's got some treatment issues to it, we can provide treatment to address it. So my understanding, when dealing with this board, the last meeting we were at, it was more of an issue of do we have the quantity, not as much the issue of the board's concern with quality.
I think the only thing with quality is if for any reason there was some quality issue, what would it likely be? Because it's one thing if there's like salt, or if it's, it's going to depend on what the parameter is, if there's, in fact, any exceedance.
Agreed.
So I don't know if it's a simple filtering process versus something that's more significant. I doubt that's the case, but we just don't have the information, obviously. And I don't know, based on history of other wells around here, whether anything in particular has been encountered. Not that I'm aware of, so.
Yeah, and this board, for purposes of seeker, just wanted to confirm that there was nothing substantial as far as contaminants or anything like that.
Those were my comments at this point, but I would love to just get to now since all these studies have been prepared, the traffic, to get it all rolled up into one now as far as being comprehensive and documenting that we've addressed all the Part 2 comments or what we thought were the thresholds at that point in time. Pat, do you have any comments?
It just curious as to where you plan on getting the fill. really doesn't have anything much to do with it. I'm just curious.
It's too early to say, but there's a lot of fill available locally, so I'd imagine it would be from a local source.
Pat's comment, is there anything in the SWIP or anything that has to do with the soil and the grading that there's a, that it be clean fill, is it tested beforehand, sort of what is done in terms of the parameters of fill being brought in typically?
Not that I recall, but
It's not involved in the SWIP, but there's DEC requirements. So depending on the amount of fill that you're trucking, and I forget what the threshold is, I think I want to say it's like 1,000 yards. There's going to need to be, and this is more of a matter of the building
Manifest?
Yeah, exactly it. There needs to be a manifest where the borrow pit is, when it was taken from there, brought to the site and dropped off. That will need to be established for a matter of the building inspector's purposes at the time that we locate the borrow pit and decide to bring in that fill. I mean, that's how I've done it in the past.
There's standard conditions language you could use as far as requiring that and requiring a certification of a clean fill.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. That's why I'd love to now wrap up all the studies so that we make sure whatever notes, whatever we want to include in the neg deck, that they're incorporated if it goes the neg deck route. So, Pat, was there anything else?
No other questions?
Okay, thank you. Louis?
I have no questions.
Thank you. Anything else for us? We'll get you back on an agenda so we could talk seeker.
Yeah, I guess so. If I'm leaving here understanding correctly, you want some type of a part 3?
Well,
You want at least things compiled in one report with some kind of a narrative in the front.
I don't know that I need all the hard actually what would be useful is if, how you do the Dropbox and links?
Sure.
Can we do something where all the reports are in
That's
one?
already been given. So everything's in there.
Oh, so when you give us the links, we get like the update of what's been added? But is there the link that has
I can, if.
like a seeker file?
Yes, because there's been many, renditions and just new submissions of the plans throughout the process. So I think if it could just be the studies that are relevant to the seeker, that would be.
Yeah, I have provided that to the board in the past, and every time so when I'm giving you just what's been updated for this particular meeting, I don't want to flood you with, you follow what I'm saying?
No, understood.
So
But
there has been a Dropbox link that's been set in the past. So like, for instance, the latest SWIP is in there, the latest site plan's in there, the latest traffic report's in there. I probably need to recirculate that link, but
Yes.
the town does have that.
Okay, so I think just
The habitat, the other items that were the well testing, just to make sure it's all in one comprehensive. If it's in a link, that's
Yeah.
great. But just to make sure that's all.
Right, I don't know that we need it packaged. I just want to make sure we have access to all of them. We develop the list, and then we can reference them as we're putting together whatever secret document we put together.
That's all you were
For now,
requesting?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So there's no expanded EAF, nothing at this point?
Hold off, let's look at everything that's been done. We might want some summary, but let's talk about it. I think we just need to I want to go through the list of the studies at this point. And in the meantime, what does the board think about a public information meeting? Because if we do that, I think that should be the very next meeting that we have, so that we can continue this.
I agree. I'd like to do that sooner than later.
Okay.
Both to get the comment at this point, but also to move the process along.
Okay,
I agree.
yes?
I agree.
I agree.
Okay, so we'll do that at the next meeting, the public information meeting.
Is there something special I have to do for that? You have to know? I'd have
It's
never
not
done
a
one.
public hearing, so how do you want to
Right.
handle notifying the public?
We may just put it on the web. I think, because I don't know, it's not a formal public hearing. So in terms of the notification requirements, we just want to know, we want people to know that we're having it, but I don't know that we need to do the official circulation. I think if we put it on the town's website, let people know, and we'll do that.
There are concerned residents here tonight that are hearing this, so they can also spread the word themselves.
Of course.
You want it on the next meeting, which is November 10th then?
Yes,
I think that's what
if that works.
10th or the 15th.
If we can do the 10th, that'd be good.
Okay.
Because then maybe on the 15th, we can start to just make sure we have everything as far as seeker. Or if there's something brought up by the public, then we can address what might have to be addressed. All right? Okay. With that, I know we have our members of the public here. If you want to come on up, and if you have any comments you'd like to offer to us. You just heard that we're going to have a public information meeting. So you can also wait until that time, but certainly the sooner we know, the applicant knows, and then if anything needs to be addressed, it can be. So does anybody want to come up and speak to the project? Come on up. You can, if you state your name for the record, and it's actually usually name and address, and then just, speak into the mic so that we can put this into our minutes.
Do I need, is it on?
It's on. When you see the
Okay.
red, it's on.
Okay, very good.
Thanks.
My name is Ron Johnson. I live at 88 Shadowmere Road. So I'm in the community, Shadowmere Road, Ruby Road. We're in the community around Blythley Lake. That is, our concern is just and it's not going to be addressed tonight, I know, but when we were told we had a couple of Zoom calls, Zoom meetings that we had some time ago, and we were told in the first Zoom meeting that we would be receiving personal letters when the next meeting would be, or when there would be a public meeting. So I'm not sure if that's going to, I hear
If I could just jump in, I think it was a Zoom meeting relative to the DEC approval. Is that correct? Does that sound familiar? Because this board hasn't held a public hearing yet.
Right.
This board doesn't give public, well, there's always notice of this board's meetings posted online as far as the agenda and what's on. When there's actually a public hearing that triggers then the neighbor notification requirement, that's when the applicant's required to notify neighbors within a certain distance. But otherwise, notice of just a meeting itself is available online. But I know there was DEC public hearing or DEC public session that I'm not sure what those notice requirements are. That's
Is that published in the ENB, do you think? Does that get published in the ENB, the public hearings for permits? Sorry? Yeah, sure. Yeah. Yeah, if you want to stay up here, Mike, if it's easier.
So
Yeah, this one too.
it was the first time I've done it myself. It was a public participation plan. The DEC now, I guess, if you have wastewater treatment facilities in environmentally disadvantaged areas, that's how I understand it. And I believe the north side of Harriman Heights Road falls inside that environmentally disadvantaged area. They require you to hold this public participation meeting. It's essentially a public hearing through the DEC. The focus is simply on and solely on the wastewater treatment facilities that are on the site. There were a lot of questions during those Zoom meetings that were pertaining to matters that didn't involve the wastewater treatment facilities. So I encouraged the public at that point to understand that we would have a planning board, at least that was my understanding at the time, a planning board public hearing, most likely a joint public hearing between the planning board and town board, where those non-related issues to the wastewater treatment facilities could be addressed at that time. And that we would send out notification via certified return receipt mail, which is typical for a public hearing. So that's exactly what was discussed at those Zoom meetings.
I know I've seen maps because we worked on a project in Hilburn, and they are within one of these communities. I'm not sure this is the map. I was going to check, but so just to be clear, so the site is over here where I have my cursor off of Harriman Heights, right? And this is Shadowmere,
That's correct, yes.
right? And this is
Blythe, yeah.
okay. Just to get us referenced as far as where you are relative to the project. Okay. From Shadowmere Road, which is right, this road in here. Okay, perfect. Okay. So we are going to have a public information meeting November 10th. So if you would, if there's concerns or if you think your neighbors want to come out, just let them know. That'll be part of this planning board meeting. Because before we sign off on the environmental review, if there's any concerns, we want to make sure that they're addressed. Okay? Now, did you have any other comments you wanted to raise this evening?
I just was wondering about that. I know that this meeting.
Could you pull the mic to you?
I have an extra.
Okay.
See,
I know that this meeting probably doesn't concern lightly, but we've all had we have homes on that lake. We want to keep it pristine.
not economically disadvantaged?
Huh? We want to keep it pristine.
Right.
And so our concern is the lake.
Sure, of course.
We go at the very end of the road. Excuse me. You can go to the very end of the road. Larry Deblinger and myself, we live at the very end, and we're not terribly far from the project when you think about it, right at that end. And it's just beautiful there. So we would like to keep it that way.
Sure, so, so they're over here,
Yes.
and, right, so you're around this,
We're
so
just
that's.
through the woods.
Right, so you have concerns about, what might happen?
Yes.
Okay.
How far it will go. I mean, once they come back towards the lake or back towards our road, will they still, there's a beautiful woods there. I know there's a wetlands there as well.
So I think a good question to ask, just for their benefit, is to what direction is this draining? Is it draining in the direction of the wetlands? This wetland and down in here in this system?
So on the south side of the road, most of the project is actually draining towards the golf course. That's where all my stormwater basins are, which,
Yeah, I don't think it drains towards.
So they're going in this direction?
yeah.
That's correct.
So during those meetings, their major concerns were the condition of the lakes, the discharge from our wastewater treatment plants, and the impact that would have potentially on the eutrophication of those lakes. I listened, took notes. I had to prepare a summary that I had to submit to the DEC. There were some subsequent emails that I received from the public that I also copied the DEC on. They were asking questions as it related to ammonia levels, phosphorus, things of that nature.
You have those submissions that were sent to the DEC?
That's all in that Dropbox
That's all in that
link, yeah.
Dropbox,
So
okay.
everything's in there. So I did copy the DEC. Mike Grosso, I believe, is the person is handling this project. Ryan O'Mara is the one who's actually reviewing the actual wastewater treatment facilities and the speedies permit. Have not heard back from them yet. Did have some conversations with them, and just waiting for their response. So they're aware. I forwarded the emails from the community to them.
Okay,
So they are going to weigh in if there's anything to weigh in on.
okay. So we have gotten some of that correspondence at the planning board level as well. So we're aware of it, and that's in part why I think we want to offer the public information meeting.
Right. And that's scheduled for the 10th of November?
Yes. And that's a Thursday. The first,
Yes.
right? It's a Thursday. Well, yes, second Thursday of the month, the 10th. We'll probably do it first just to have it and then move on to the rest of the agenda. You're welcome. Thank you. Anybody else want to come on up? Come on up. Good evening. And again, just your name and address for the record.
Hello, my name's Jim Gulick, 9 Shadowmere Road. This isn't anything to do with the water or anything. This is, the attorney was talking about you have to do X, Y, and then you need a subdivision also later. Why? Why is this all not done all at one time?
The way the conservation cluster zoning works is that it requires the land, if it's involving more than one parcel, the land to all be combined into one prior to any approval of that, of the rezoning or perhaps of the site plan. And then if the applicant wants later on to, I think this applicant desires to subdivide into 4 lots they have to return to this board for the subdivision.
So I think as one example, the applicant is proposing land for a ball field, correct? And are you guys
That is correct.
constructing it, or you're providing the land for it? Because I know it's shown, but I didn't know if that
At this
was.
time, my understanding is that we are constructing the field.
Okay, so that land that the ball field is going to sit on, I imagine, is going to get transferred to the town. Right, so that's why I need the subdivide, to be able to take that ball field and put it in the ownership of the town. That's one of the purposes for the subdivision.
Also as part of the plan, so the convent, which owns the properties, is going to be subdivided off from the rest of the project, and they're going to sit on their own land.
Oh, so it's going to be the convent, the old folks home, the one across the street, and then the towns.
Right.
And that doesn't all happen? You have to do that at a later date?
It
just
can
doesn't
happen until the zone has been landed as CCR. If that happens, you can't go through, you can't do that until then.
I'm happy to hear you said if, though, because to me, living there for a little while, it just seems to me like that's an awful lot and an awful.
Listen, we have to say if, a decision hasn't been made yet.
Right.
It's that
Okay.
simple.
All right, I appreciate your time, thank you.
I'd just
Thank
like to add one comment to that, and I do appreciate what Mr. Gulick is saying, but we're keeping 65% of the land open space. It's important to note that 65% of the land will remain in open space in perpetuity.
Anybody else? Would you like to come on up? Sure.
So you mentioned that 5% of the land is dedicated to open space in perpetuity, and who will own that land? Who will control that land? Or have you made that decision yet?
I don't know that we've necessarily made that decision. I would imagine it'll probably be the actual landowner that owns the actual projects, and they may need to just file some kind of a conservation easement as associated with the plans with the county at some point, so that it's a conservation easement, and that's it.
Has the town board expressed any interest in acquiring the land?
Outside the soccer field, not to my knowledge.
And the reason I bring that up is that, there are actually some nice trail systems, portions of them not interconnected. And I don't know if that potential exists, because there's the little trail that's off of where the ball fields are. And then there's another one over by, what's the name of the road? Over by Rye Hill. Berry. Off of Berry.
Road, yeah. The Berry Road Park has trails all throughout.
So there's all trails throughout there, and I don't know, when we get conservation easements versus picking up the land, I don't know if it's easier to be able to build trails and whatnot. But that's one of to me, I love the trail system that we have just locally.
Agreed.
You're talking about the ball fields up on Monbassia?
Yeah,
Right,
Monbassia.
because, there's the trail there that was
That goes
constructed.
behind by the lake.
And that's also, both of those are right near where the Appalachian Trail crosses Monbassia, West Monbassia. So there's certainly opportunity for interconnection.
We're essentially looking at, right, this is the land. Is this our park over here? Right?
Yeah, that looks like Monbassia, with the wetland in the back, that's
And then
correct.
I want to say Berry is somewhere in here that you come in.
That's Berry, that's Berry right
Right?
there, yep.
And some of this land is already publicly owned. And then we get over toward the golf course.
Correct.
And so you got this nice big slab of land over here. So it'd be nice to interconnect them long-term, in a trail system. But we'll talk to the town board about that in
Agreed.
terms of their
Yeah,
plans.
agreed.
So ma'am, again, if you'd like to give your name and address and let us know what your comments are.
You speak to the mic.
The little light has to turn red. That's how you know you're close.
Okay, okay.
There you go.
My name is Joy Hyman. I live at 64 Shadowmere Road. I still have a ton of questions. I will not ask them now. I'll do it at a more appropriate time. But I would like to know if the documents we saw tonight will be online at the website, monroe.newyork.org?
Last submission was put up. If
Okay,
not, I'll
I didn't
check in-
see it just now.
I'll check in the morning and make sure that they're put up. I thought I had her put the plans up, but I might have,
No, that's what I just want to know when I go home. I can,
if they're not up tonight, they'll be up first thing tomorrow morning.
okay, excellent.
Okay.
And look forward to seeing you again.
Great, thank you. Anybody else that's here want to come on up? No? You're good? All right. All right, and again, you have another opportunity next month as we start to wind this down. Anybody else have any comments with regard to this application? We're good for now? All right, thank you.
Thank you
We'll
for
see
your
you
time
next-
tonight. Yes, we'll see you in November.
See you in November.
Hey, Mike.
Of our planning board, of them broke down, but I asked her, maybe I didn't.
5-1, huh?
Are there minutes we can address tonight?
We don't have a quorum for the two left over from,
Okay.
I don't even know what day I'm on anymore.
All right. So I think that's it. Is there anything else we need to do, Noreen?
Yes, there is.
Oh, and what is that? Shall we first adjourn?
Oh.
Yeah, you can adjourn and do all whatever.
Okay. So may I have a
moved.
motion to adjourn? Thank you. May I have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any abstentions? Any nays? Motion carries. We are.